Shabbat Shalom, Happy Sabbath. We're thankful again that Yah has been good to us, and this morning we have come to continue that reverence to Him, and we are going to be looking this morning at the subject, the birth of Zion's children. The birth of Zion's children, the birth of a nation. During the course of the last week, we have been watching wide-eyed the unfolding events of the world, particularly in the Middle East. And it would seem to me that the events have not lent understanding to the minds of many people, and as a consequence, they're not understanding what is happening. And so this morning we want to use the word of Yah to frame those events and get a greater understanding of what is happening. Because as I think of those events, I think of a situation way back when the then President Obama spoke to some reporters in regards to the events that were unfolding at the time. I think it was 2012, regarding the escalating events in Syria. And he made the comment at that time that if they were to be chemical weapons, some of you might remember that, that for him would be the red line, and it would certainly change his calculus. Now, it was interesting that he made that statement. We remember that subsequent to that statement, the Ghouta attacks where thousands of people is said to have died because of chemical weapons used, but nothing happened. At the time he spoke, one gets the impression that his finger was on the military trigger, but nothing happened. And so this morning, we want to look at not so much the arithmetic of that situation, but as the president then said, the calculus. Arithmetic, as you know, is just that one branch of mathematics that deals with static numbers. It's dealing with addition, multiplication, division, and so on and so forth. But calculus deals with the continuous change. And so we want to look at that prophetic calculus that is taking place in the Middle East and elsewhere. Because you also will remember that having said it would be a red line and he did nothing, then it left a vacuum that was later filled by Russia in the Middle East that it didn't have before. And so we're watching these events play out in the theaters of our own homes on TV. And so we want to make sense of them and what is happening in the world. And so it drives me to the year 1917. And it has to do with a letter that was written to Lord Rothschild by author James Balfour. We call it the Balfour Declaration. Now, let me read part of this to you. The letter says, "Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to you and approved by the cabinet, His Majesty's government, view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Nothing will be done to them to injure them, or the rights of the political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to knowledge of the Zionist federations. Yours, Arthur James Balfour. And that was published a week later in the newspaper in England. The intent here was, we want to establish a Jewish nation. And as I read or reread this letter, I ask myself the question as to whether the intent of the British government in 1917 is consistent with the content of Isaiah's declaration. Turn with me to the book of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 11, and we will read, as was read, verse 11 again. And it shall come to pass in that day that Yahweh will again a second time set his hand to possess himself of the remnant of his people, who shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Ethiopia and from Elam, that's Iran, and from Shinar, of course that's Babylon, and from Amath and from the coastlands of the sea. Isaiah here is writing some 700 years before the Messiah came into being on earth, and he's letting you know these things are going to happen in the end time. I'm going to round up my dispersed people. They're scattered, but they're not lost. And I'm going to bring them back to the promised land. As I read this, I see no allusion to Europe, but Ethiopia, Al-Kabulan, North Africa, West Africa, and elsewhere. And so it is reasonable to ask myself whether or not we can continue to believe some of the things that they have taught us about Yah's people. And whether or not the nation that was established on the 14th of May, 1948, the Jewish nation, whether or not the influx of people from Europe, whether or not that was the right move, or whether or not Yah here in Isaiah is talking about something else. I'm going to round up my people. That's given. But who are these people that he's going to round up? Who are they? Come with me to the book of Jeremiah, and we will dilate upon a few verses in chapter 16, beginning at verse 14. Therefore, lo, the days are coming, declare Yahweh, when it shall be said no more by the life of Yahweh, who brought up the sons of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but by the life of Yahweh, who hath brought up the sons of Israel out of the land of the north, and out of all the land whither he had driven them, so will I bring them back upon their own soil, which I gave to their fathers. Behold me, sending for many fishers, declareth Yahweh, and they shall catch them, and thereafter will I send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from off every mountain and from off every hill and out of the cleft of the crags. Jeremiah wants you to know that there is going to be a second Exodus. And the Exodus that took place in Egypt, it was really nothing to compare to this Exodus in the last days. A second time, there's going to be an Exodus. And so, as we studied the Balfour Agreement, the world has since decided that the people that are currently in Israel, these are the Jews. And so a matter is never settled until Yah speaks. He is the final arbiter on all matters. He is sovereign, and when he speaks, his law is his word, and his word is law. And there is no court on this earth to which you may appeal, supreme or otherwise, against Yah's word. And so this morning, we want to look at the theorem of this calculus that the president spoke about. We want to look at that. Look at the changes that have taken place. We want to look at that because my mind is also drawn to the fact that in 1977, Menachem Begum, you will remember, those of you who are old enough, became the prime minister of Israel, and he then called the head of Mossad, called him, I have a duty for you. And his famous words were, bring me the Ethiopian Jews. Bring me the Ethiopian Jews. And the movement, the task, the operations of Operation Solomon, Operation Joshua, Operation Moses, to airlift all the Ethiopian Jews from Al-Kabul and from Africa to the Promised Land was on the way. It was on the way. And of course, this has been a process. And many of those Ethiopian Jews, they had to trek all the way from Ethiopia to Sudan. And we're told that almost 15,000 people were airlifted to the Promised Land in about 36 hours. And so we have Isaiah here asking, can a nation be born in a day? Can a nation be born in one day? And the answer has to be yes. And so I believe the prophecy here is not talking about that day in history, 14th of May, 1948, when the nation of Israel was established. But when the children, the dispersed children of Al-Qabulan, in one day were brought back to the land of promise. They said in one aircraft alone, over 1,200 people, the seats were taken out. And they filled this and were brought to Israel. Now, today we have of some 200,000 people of African origin in Israel. 170,000 of those, we're told, are Falasha Jews. Falasha is a pejorative term that they use to refer to them. And so they're there. But if you were to listen to the media, you wouldn't believe that. Because it's almost as if they don't exist. They don't exist. But Yah says, I'm going to round them up because I know where they are. Sometimes people refer to them as the lost 10 tribes. No, they're not lost. They're scattered, not lost. And so he's rounding them up. And so I would like for you to join me in the book of Stephanos. That's the book of Zephaniah. And I'm going to read chapter 1, a few verses in chapter 1, Stephanos. And the word here says, the word of Yahweh which came unto Stephanos, son of Cushi, son of Gedaliah, son of Amariah, son of Ezekiah, in the days of Josiah, son of Ammon, the king of Judah. Zephaniah here is letting you know that he's a prophet. And his father is Cushi. Don't miss that. Whether you speak Greek or you speak Hebrew, that means he's black. That's what Cushi means. But he goes further than that. He says, Cushi is the son of Gedaliah. He says that Gedaliah, who at the time of Jeremiah was the governor of Judah, he says, my relative was governor of Judah. It's here in the word. And he aligns himself all the way to Hezekiah, the king of Judah, in the line of King David. There is no ambiguity here, either patent or latent. It's here in the word. You can't miss that. And it seems as if he's gone out of his way to make this known that he's a man of color and that he is of royalty. It's there in the word. Josiah is king, and he's saying, in fact, he prophesied at the same time that Josiah, who took to the throne at 8 years old, whose father Ammon was assassinated, whose father is Manasseh, whose father is Hezekiah. He wants you to know that. So as we trace that lineage to King David, we understand the coloration of the people. And if we should ever stumble across the book of Esther in chapter 1, during the time of King Ahasuerus was ruling, it says the empire stretched all the way from India to Ethiopia. It's there in the word. We don't have to conjecture on that. And so Zephaniah establishes that. Now turn with me to chapter 3 of the same book. Chapter 3 of the same book. And we're going to read verses 9 and 10. So this Cushite prophet here writes, "Surely then will I turn unto the peoples a lip made pure, a language. I'm going to give them a pure language, that they may call on the name of Yahweh, and they may serve him with one consent." There is no disunity. I'm going to give them a pure language. And some will not call him Jesus, and others call him Lord, and some call him Adonai. They're going to call him with one consent. And it's the name that he gave to Moses and said, this is for all generation. His name is Yahweh. I'm going to give them that. Because he wants you to know that the Messiah is not Greek. It's not English, it's Hebrew. Then he says in verse 10, "From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia shall come my suppliants, the daughter of my dispersed ones shall hear along a gift to me." He says, my people from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, they have a gift for me and they're going to bring it. It's here in the word. Not only did he say that, he said, they are my dispersed. They are among the scattered ones. They're not Baptist, Pentecostal. They do not get lost in the labels. They have one faith, and that faith is in Yeshua. And many have left the faith, but they are members of the church. And they can't see that. So Zephaniah here, who is an end-time prophet, is letting us know that Yah is going to round up his people from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. And so we see this happening in Israel even now. But the media is very quiet on this. Very, very quiet. And one wonders why they are so quiet. So turn with me to the book of Chronicles. And we'll go to 2 Chronicles. And we're going to chapter 35, I should say. Now, as we read 2 Chronicles chapter 35, Josiah is king. And he's undertaken a great reform. Why the reform? Because both his father, Ammon, and his grandfather, Manasseh, had led Israel, Judah, into sin. The whole nation had sinned. And so he inherited a situation where they had moved so far away from Yah that the people didn't know what was right and what was wrong. It's a kind of now time when people don't even know the difference between a male and a female. And the pronouns are being changed to accommodate politics. When people do not understand the sanctuary and also the sanctity of marriage, they don't understand that. Up is down and down is up. And they will tell you that, at least postmodernism will tell you, that there is no ultimate reality. Reality is simply the way you language your experience. That's the kind of time when Josiah ruled. And the word says, and Josiah kept in Jerusalem a Passover unto Yahweh, and they slaughtered the Passover on the 14th of the first month, the 14th of Nisan. Last week we talked about this, did we not? That the church in earlier times had sought to keep Passover on a different day from that which the scriptures said it should be kept. And so out of that came Easter and other pagan festivals like Christmas, Christmas, and we're indeed in the season for that, but it's contrary to what the word says. So he kept it on the 14th day. And he set the priest over their charges and encouraged them unto the service of the house of Yah, and said to the Levites, who gave instruction to all of Israel as to the things which were hallowed unto Yahweh, put the holy ark in the house which Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, did build. He said, go and get the ark. It's quite evident that the ark was not in the temple at the time when he was ruling. So the question is, where was the ark? Where was the ark? Because you know, the ark is a precious item to Israel. Everywhere they went, they took the ark. And of course, you remember when Melech David went to collect the ark and brought it home, and he was in jubilation, and the whole kingdom of Israel was in jubilation. And so Josiah here says to the priest, go and get the ark. Don't let it be a burden on your shoulders, because they were told that the ark must be carried by the priests on poles on their shoulders. And that's why Uzzah was killed at the threshing floor, because he was carrying the ark on a cart. Obedience is better than sacrifice. If Yah says, bring it on your shoulder, don't bring it in a cart. And so when Yah said, keep my Sabbath holy, don't give him Sunday. Don't give him the first day of the week. You can't do that. When Yah says it has to be a male and a female in marriage, don't give him two of the same. Can't do that. His word is law. We're not living in a democracy. We're living in a kingdom with one sovereign, and his word is law. And so Josiah says, go and get the ark. The reason the ark was not in the temple at this time, as I indicated earlier, was because Ammon and the Manasseh had built high places and had ransacked the place. And so the priests who were there took the ark out and brought the ark to Elephantine Island in Egypt and began worshiping down there. So Josiah said, go and get the ark. Go and get it. But the ark was there in Elephantine Island. Yes, the priests built something similar that they had in Jerusalem, a temple, and they were now worshiping the true worship in Egypt. And it had been there for a while, till at last that was taken, the ark was taken to Tanya Kirkus Island in Ethiopia, and then transferred to Axum in Ethiopia. That's where the ark has been all the sin. So Josiah learned that Pharaoh Necho was coming up to battle to help Syria. We're talking about Syria, even as we're talking about Israel. Because Yah says in book of Isaiah, I have used Syria as my rod of correction. I'm going to use Syria to whip certain nations into line. And as you remember, it was Assyria who took the children of Israel, the 10 tribes, and brought them into captivity. You remember that. But as we're nearing the end time, I want you to join me. We're going to go back to 2nd Chronicles chapter 35 in a minute, but I want you to see what Yah says about Syria this time. Chapter 17 of Isaiah. And we have to make a distinction between Assyria and Syria. Assyria was the empire. In chapter 17 of Isaiah, the word says, the oracle of Damascus. Lo, Damascus is to be removed from being a city. Did you hear me? Yes, in the end time, Damascus in Syria is to be removed from being a city and shall become a heap of ruins. What were we looking at last week? Forsaken are the desolate cities, for a flock shall they serve, which shall lie down and have none to make them afraid. Then shall the fortress cease, and Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Syria, like the glory of the sons of Israel, shall they be, declared Yahweh of hosts. Yah says, Damascus shall be a wasteland, fit only for animals. That's what he says is going to happen. And we're watching that unfold before our very eyes. So let's go back to chapter 35 of 2nd Chronicles. Let's go back there, because the word says that King Necho, Pharaoh Necho, had come up to fight with Syria. Why? Because at the time, the Assyrian Empire was the prominent empire, but it started to wane, to weaken, and Babylon was coming up as the prominent power. That's what was happening. And so Israel was sandwiched between those superpowers, between Assyria, who had been an enemy, and between Babylon that was coming up and subsequently would be taken to Babylon because they had rejected the warning that Jeremiah had given. And so that was what was happening. So Egypt now, who was one of the first empires, is coming up to help Syria so that to put down Babylon. That's the context. That's the calculus. Because we're looking at the changes that have taken place. As the president suggested, it would change his calculus. Well, the calculus is changing. It is changing. And so the word here says that the Passover in verse 18 had not been kept. The people had reneged on their duty to honor Yah since the days of Samuel the prophet. That's what he said. And so it says, verse 19, in the 18th year of the reign of Josiah, remember, he was 8 years old when he took the throne. So obviously he had guardians, and they perhaps were running the country and grooming him. So in the 18th year, so it would have been about 26 years, because he took the throne at 8 years old. Of Josiah, he kept the Passover. After all this, when Josiah had prepared the house, Necho, king of Egypt. Now understand that Necho, although he's a pharaoh of Egypt, it is reputed that he's an Ethiopian, because many Ethiopian kings ruled Egypt. He was not the only one. And you read the history of the 26th and the 25th dynasty, you will see that Ethiopia was a great nation at that time. And the Ethiopia that I'm speaking about is not the Ethiopia that we now see as the East African nation. We're talking about Sudan, the kingdom of the capital of which was in Muro. So what intrigued me was that the Ethiopians in 1991 and 1984, 85, they trekked all the way to Sudan, and Sudan was making it difficult for them to be transported. And so the CIA, Mossad, and all these people, British businessmen, all of them had to come together to airlift the Ethiopian people out of Sudan. Now, when you read the Bible, Sudan is part of Ethiopia. So it is intriguing. But let's go back to 2 Chronicles. It says that when Josiah heard that Necho, king of Egypt, came up to fight against Carmeshit, by Euphrates, and Josiah went forth against him. Of course, Josiah knows that if I can get the ark, and the best way to get the ark would be to attack and kill Pharaoh Necho, because the ark is in Elephantine Island in Egypt. But he sent unto him, this is Necho, saying, what have I to do with you, O king of Judah? I'm not at war with you. Leave me alone. Not against thee have I come this day, but against the house wherewith I have war. I'm fighting against what? Babylon. I've come to help Syria. So he's telling you. And Elohim hath given word to speed. Cease thou from provoking Elohim, who is with me, lest he destroy thee. Now understand what's going on here. Josiah is king of Judah. And of course, Yah says, my throne is with Israel. But because of the apostasy that had taken place here in the temple, the kindly priests had taken the worship down to Egypt. And so Yah's presence, because when you read Ezekiel chapter 10, Ezekiel tells us that the Ruach had left the temple and gone up on the threshold. So his presence wasn't there. His presence was in Egypt. And so they were getting direction in Egypt, but not in Jerusalem. So Necho, Pharaoh, said, Yah has told me to do this. Leave me alone. Don't provoke me. Don't do that. But he didn't listen. Come with me, therefore, to turn your page over to chapter 34 of the same book, 2 Chronicles. Because they had now found the book of the law. The book of Deuteronomy had been lost. The people didn't know what to do, so they found it in the church. Can you imagine? The book of the law is lost in the church, just like today. And so they had gone to the prophetess. Her name was Huldah. They'd gone to her to seek direction. And they wanted to know what was going to happen. And so she told them. Let's read from verse 24. Thus said Yahweh, behold me bringing in calamity upon this place and upon the inhabitants thereof, even all the curses that are written in the book which they have read before the king of Judah, because they have forsaken me and burn incense unto idols, so as to provoke me to anger with all the works of their hands. Therefore hath my wrath been poured out upon this place, and shall not be quenched. But unto the king of Judah, who had sent you to inquire me. So Josiah had sent to inquire of Huldah, the prophetess, what would happen. And this is what was said. But unto the king of Judah, who had sent you to inquire of Yahweh, thus shall you say unto him, thus saith Yahweh, Elohim of Israel, as touching the words which thou hast heard, because tender was thy heart, and thou didst humble thyself before Elohim, when thou hearest his words against this place and against the inhabitants thereof, and didst humble thyself before me, and didst rent thy clothes and weep before me, therefore I also have heard is the declaration of Yahweh, behold me gathering thee unto thy. I'm going to gather you into your father. I don't want you to see the calamity. This is the prophecy. I don't want you to see the calamity. And thou shalt be gathered unto the sepulchre in peace. And thine eyes shall not look upon all the calamity which I am bringing in upon the place and upon the inhabitants thereof. And they returned unto the king this message, and the king sent and gathered together all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. So he knew, but he still went out to battle. He still went out to battle. Wow. Yah says, you're going to be gathered to your fathers. And so he went out, and as you know, he died. But a question emerges again for us as we look as to who is it that Yah is really gathering up? Who is this Zion? Who is Israel? Who is? Because many have laid claim to being Israel. And the people are confused somewhat. Come with me to Ezekiel chapter 37. Ezekiel chapter 37. Because Ezekiel here is in Babylon. He's one of the captives that were taken to Babylon, just like Daniel. And he's prophesying. The hand of Yahweh being upon me, he carried me forth into the rock of Yahweh and set me down in the midst of a plain, and the same was full of bones. As I read this, I think of the trek that the Ethiopians made through, some of them walked for 3 days through the desert to get to Sudan. And we're told that of the people that left Ethiopia, 1/3 of them died in the wilderness, trying to get to Israel. One wonders whether it is these people that Ezekiel saw and called them dry bones. And he caused me to pass near them round about on every side, and lo, they were very many on the face of the plain, and lo, they were very dry. Then said he unto me, Son of man, can these bones live? We could say that in contemporary English, couldn't we? Can these Ethiopians live? And I said, My master Yahweh, thou knowest. Then said he unto me, Prophesy over these bones, and thou shalt say unto them, Ye bones so dry that ye hear the word of Yahweh. Thus saith my master Yahweh unto these bones, Lo, I am about to bring into you spirit, and you shall live. You who have long been forgotten by the world, you who have been in Ethiopia all these years, keeping the laws of Yah, but the world has seen you as dry bones. And every time you popped up on the screen, we see Biafra, we see Sudan, we see the injustices of South Africa, we see Zimbabwe. We see that. And people are wondering, can these African bones live? Ezekiel says, only you, oh yeah, only you know. Thus saith the master Yahweh, verse 5, unto the bone, Lo, I am about to bring into you spirit, saith, you shall live. They shall live. Yes, I will live. You see, what we need to understand here, the dry bones are the people who have been dispersed, scattered, gone away from Israel. Yah said, I'm going to breathe new life unto them, and a nation will be raised up in them. I'm bringing them back. Oh, these bones are going to live. They're going to live. And so when you see Mossad, the CIA, the British agent, and the government of Israel sending aeroplane in one day to bring them back, you know that Yah is at work in Africa. You know it, because we are now at the last days of history. And Yah says, I'm going to round them back up and bring them home. I'm going to do that. Verse 15, come with me to verse 15. And the word of Yah came unto me, saying, Thou therefore, son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for Judah. Did you hear me? We understand this, that in the time of Solomon, well, just after Solomon died from his son, the people went to him and asked for some reprieve. And the kingdom was split at this time. Jeroboam got 10 pieces, the 10 tribes, and 2 tribes remained in the south, that Judah and Benjamin. So we have the northern tribe and we have the southern tribe, so it's 2. But Yah says in the last day, I'm going to make them one stick. So listen what he said. Thou therefore, son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for Judah, and for the sons of Israel his companions. Then take thou another stick and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the sons of Israel his companions. So let's deal with that. Who is Israel? Because everywhere you go now, people say, well, I'm a Jew. The Bible teaches that to be a Jew, you have to be a descendant of Judah, because that's only one tribe. So everybody now is saying, I'm from the tribe of Judah. So we don't have any Israelites anymore, just Jews. But come with me to Genesis chapter 48. Chapter 48. You know the story very well, that Joseph was sold, taken to Egypt, and became prime minister of Egypt. No, what intrigues me also is the fact that we're talking about at the time when all the black people were in Egypt. It's the land of Ham, David says. So the people were black. And Joseph, by way of Eurocentric presentation, makes Joseph white. And Joseph is among all these black people in Egypt, and his brothers came to visit him in Egypt and didn't recognize him. One white man against all these black people. Silly, isn't it? Yeah, and you know that it is. And so we won't even laugh at that. The point I want to make here is simply this. His father is down there now, and because of the famine that took place. And there's a famine in the church too, but Amos said it's not for food. It's for understanding the word. It's not for bread and water, but it's for understanding of the word. And so that's what we're in search of, understanding here. And so Jacob learned that his son that he thought had died, Yah had given him two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And so he's about to pass on to his father, to die. So he calls them, and Joseph visits him, and he's now going to bless them. Listen to me. Come with me to verse 13. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand and on Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand and Israel's right hand, and drew them near to him. Now, Manasseh is the oldest. Hear me? So Manasseh should get the right hand. But that's not what Israel did. Then Israel put forth his right hand and laid it up on the head of Ephraim. He puts his right hand on the younger son. Though he was the younger, and his left hand upon the head of Manasseh. And by the way, as you watch the TV and you see what is going on in the Golden Heights, which is bordering, part of it is in Israel and part in Syria, the Golden Heights, which everybody wants, the Golden Heights, was given to Manasseh. That tribe, Manasseh tribe, got the Golden Heights. So when people are telling you, and you're watching the news and you hear people from the United Nations saying Israel is occupying land, no. The land that Yah gave to Israel was about 150 miles long and 75 miles wide from Dan to Beersheba, right there up underfoot, the highest hill that they have in Israel. Mount Hermon. We won't even deal with chapter 6 of Genesis. This is where the fallen angels came down. And at the base of that, Yeshua said, "Who do men say I am?" in Matthew chapter 16. The point here is Joseph places his hands. Come with me to verse 16. It is saying, "The messenger who hath been my redeemer from all evil, bless the lads, and may they be called upon my name." Did you get that? "And the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and they swarm unto a multitude in the midst of the earth." Jacob says, "Let Manasseh and Ephraim be called by my name, Israel." Don't miss that. That means only Ephraim and Manasseh, these North African boys, were called Israelites, and their descendants are Israelites. The other tribes were not given this blessing. In the same way that Esau did not get Jacob's blessing, only these two boys born in North Africa, their mother is an African. They are Israel. So when you see that Joseph had a multicolored coat, it's a reflection of the number of people who are going to come in by way of acceptance to Yeshua, whether you're black or you're white, and you become an Israelite in that way. You don't have to be born in Israel to be an Israelite. It is by acceptance of Yeshua. Galatians 3:29 said, if you be in Yeshua, then are you Abraham's seed. If you're not in Yeshua, and today in Israel, majority of the people, rabbinic people, don't believe in the Messiah. They don't. So only if you are in Yeshua are you Abraham's seed. So when we read earlier on in chapter 37 of Ezekiel, that one stick is for Israel. One stick is for Ephraim and Manasseh, Israel, the descendants of them. But let's hear what that man Moses had to say. We talked about it this morning in chapter 10, because we cannot always listen to what rabbis say or what pastors say or what bishops say, but always what Yah says. Always. Chapter 10 of Genesis, that's Bereshit. And Moses, as you know, is a man who spent time with Yah on Mount Sinai taking dictation. And Yah told him to write things down, which he did. So he's letting us know that Noah had 3 sons, and he's addressing them. Now, these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and there were born to them sons after the flood. So he's addressing Japheth here. Please have some attention to this. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, and Magog, and Madai, and Javan, and Tubal, and Meshach, and Tyrus. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, and Riphath, and Togarmah. And the sons of Javan, Elisha, and Tarshish, Kittim, and Rodanim. And from these were dispersed the inhabitants of the coastland of the nations of the land, each man by his tongue and their families in their nation. He says, from the sons of Japheth, Ashkenaz, these are Gentiles. Moses wrote that. 92% of the people in Israel now saying that they're Jew, claiming Jewry, are from Ashkenaz. Moses says they're Gentiles. Who will you believe? Rabbinic scholars or Moses? Who will you believe? Now, he starts out by telling us there are 3 sons. Very simple. Let's deal with the arithmetic of this, not the calculus of this. 3 sons. And he says, Japheth, from these are the Gentiles. By way of deduction, he's telling you that Shem and Ham are not so. Isn't that? That's what he's saying. But that's not what they teach in churches. That's not what they teach in churches. And despite the fact that when you leaf it through, the scripture is letting you know that my people look like me. Well, let's go back to the book of Azon that we read this morning, because we've said it, but it words replication. Revelation chapter 1, as we bring this thing to a conclusion. Revelation chapter 1. And we're told that Yohanan here, who is on the island of Patmos, who himself had known Yeshua, but not in his glorified form. He had not seen him in his glorified form, because we told on one occasion while they were eating around the table, he knelt on his breast, and he was the disciple that Yeshua loved. Doesn't mean he loved the others any less, but there was something about Yohanan that, he loved. But John is told here, John, write what you've seen. Verse 19, write therefore what things thou hast seen. What did you see? John, you saw the Messiah. Write that down. And the things that are, what are the things are? That's current. That's the 7 churches. And the things that hereafter, that's in our time, the end time. So write 3 things down. So John wrote. And John says in verse 12, and the voice that spoke to me, I turned to look. And when I turned to look, I saw lamps of gold. And in the middle of the lamps, there one like the Son of Man, clothed with robe reaching to the feet and gird about at the breast with girdle of gold. And his head and his hair white like wool. It's talking about not only color, but texture. Why do I say that? Because he could have said, as in the case of Miriam, when Miriam was cursed, oh, white like snow. That's what he said of Miriam. Not white as snow, white like wool. Woolly hair. Write that down, John. And let the churches read this and see. And also, John said, I looked at his feet. And he had feet like burnished brass. Brass, as you know, is brown. And it's a good conductor. And John wrote this down and sent it to the churches, including Laodicea, the time in which we live. But the church says, we didn't receive the memo. We didn't receive it. And so they have all kind of depiction of Yeshua. And as we're coming up to the season, they're bringing out their little cradles and say, this is baby Jesus. He was born on 25th of December. And we studied this a few weeks ago, and we talked about what happened, that he was not born in December. He was born in tabernacle. That's why the word said he tabernacled with us. We said that. And so, and they've forgotten that he's not a baby anymore. He's grown. And when he comes back, the word says, is that which comes out of his mouth will slay the wicked. That's not a baby. But the people, as you look around the communities, you see the lights celebrating. And in chapter 8 of John, he said, I am the light of the world. And so they have this Caucasian man, obese, coming down in areas like the Caribbean and Florida where there are no chimneys. And he comes down in with a reindeer, and we've got to stop and ask ourselves, what kind of foolishness is this? And you can see what the religion of Europe and others have done to the people. And so Yah said, I'm going to round up my own people, bring them back home and give them a pure language. And they will bring my present. What's the present? I'm going to bring the ark of the covenant that is in Ethiopia. That's what they're bringing. And so when we see the Ethiopian eunuch in Gaza, and he's reading from the book of Isaiah, chapter 53, and he wants to know, who is this? And Philip tells him, that's the Messiah. He says, all right, he did come, but he's gone and he's coming back. Then will they bring my present. You can't keep the ark unless you're Yah's people. You can't. And so as the psalmist wrote, "Come, ye children, hearken unto me. I will teach you the fear of Yah. What man is he that desireth light and loveth many days, that he may see? Keep thy tongue from evil and thy lips from speaking vile. Depart from evil, do good, seek peace, and pursue it." Psalm 34:11, 14. So let's ponder on these things and watch our people. As Baruch says in chapter 2 and verse 30, he says, while they are in the land of their captivity, while they're in Britain, and while they are in America, the people will come to know themselves and know who they are. In Yeshua's name I pray. Amen.